Hello, I am Shiloh Creed. Welcome to the Author's Mind. I am so excited that you are here today to learn about the craft of writing, to dig deep into authors' minds, how we work, what we do, how different we all are. Today, we have a special guest with us, Terrence L. Rotering, who graduated from the United States Air Force Academy. He retired from the United States Air Force after 20 years of service. Thank you so much for all those years of service. We appreciate that. You were a weapons system officer on a fighter aircraft worldwide, with more than 15 years at the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. Author of the 10-book Chronicles series, Terry gives readers an epic adventure of fantasy, science fiction, and spiritual warfare, which is near and dear to my heart because that is so close to what I write. Terry, welcome. I'm so excited to have you on the show. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about your Chronicles series?
Well, thank you so much, Shiloh, for letting me come on, and I've been really looking forward to it. Yeah, it's kind of the unified theory of everything, and when you act impressed with, 10 books, I've heard you have a few more than that. So I was really impressed to hear how many books you have. I'm kind of a newcomer to this, I guess. In 2005, I did a really quick book. I did Stand, or what is half of Stand now. And I just did it for my young boys at the time because I wanted to show them, no, books aren't something that you can't do. You can do books. Everybody can do books. So I did that. And then 5 years later, I was still in the Air Force and flying and doing all this stuff then. So I was very busy. And so I did a second book, and it was kind of a prequel to that. And it turned out to be much bigger. And so I was really excited about that, and I wanted to do a trilogy. And then I had a little bout with cancer, nothing serious as it turns out. But at the time, it was like, hey, you got a 50% chance in a few years. And I was like, what? And so I still remember, of all the things that you would do or think about when you were told you had cancer, your family, and I mean, just everything. The thing I still remember specifically is asking God, how important is this little book trilogy thing? But I asked him to give me more time to finish it. And then he healed me of the cancer, and it took me 15 years. I don't know if it's subconsciously I was like, oh, I better not finish this because he'll take me home, kind of thing, or what. But yeah, it just kind of fell off the radar. And then I in 2024, I said, I got to finish that because I retired and it was time to finish. So I had the trilogy done. And then I hope we have time to get into the Godwinks because that's something cool. So then in the last year and a half, I finished the last 8 books, but it's a series of I got the first trilogy done and then had some Godwinks, and I was like, oh, there's more. And so I did the prequel, and then I had some more Godwinks. I'm like, is someone telling me something? And I don't want to be like, oh, this work is inspired, but God was definitely inspiring me to do it. And then again, the third trilogy came from some more Godwinks and a granddaughter being born. I'm like, for an heirloom, I got to get her in this because, someday she'll read these. She's 1 now, but someday she'll go, Grandpa thought of me. So there's actually a part in there with a pawpaw and a little girl. And so that was the third trilogy. And then the fourth one now just came to me, and I'm like, I'm almost done with it. It's going to come out in the spring, but it's kind of the key to the whole thing.
I have a million questions in my mind now. First of all, the Air Force angle. My husband almost completed his pilot's license. He's so close to getting that done. So I know a little bit about the technical detail, the mathematical approach and mindset to flying. Do you think that career path in your life influenced your writing?
It's hard to say no because, when I was 19, I went to the academy, just wanted to be a pilot. Think Maverick in Top Gun.
Yes, of course.
I kind of went south right at graduation, so I ended up becoming Goose. So yeah, so I got unlike Goose, in the Air Force, you have all the controls. So you have the stick and throttles, and the pilots in the front seat love to have you fly because sometimes they take birds and they want to know that you can fly and bring them back and land the aircraft and everything. Think F-111, the Libya raid back in '86, and then think F-15Es, which are 2-seat F-15s that can go air to air and air to ground. So to get to the answer to your question, yeah, for sure. I mean, 20 years in the Air Force and then 15 years at Northcom. I think more than the flying part, although the flying part has influenced some of the chapters in the books, because with the 4 trilogies, it goes from the beginning of time to the end of time. So it's kind of neat because you can cover everything. But the thing that really affected me the most from the Air Force, I think, is the organizational aspect of it. Along with everything that goes with flying, unlike Top Gun in the movies you see, there's a ton of planning and a ton of just attention to detail on everything. So when you have the sprawling, unified theory of everything story, there's time travel involved. There's people that jump across books. There are folks that there's like one sentence on in the first book, and there's 9 chapters on in like the 8th book. So to keep track of all that stuff, it's amazing. Basically, that God like gave me those inputs to be able to keep track of that stuff.
I love it. I love the look into how your life affects your writing and how the two have become entwined. It doesn't sound like writing was something that you ever intended to do. I love the story of you wanting to just tell your child, you can do this. This is attainable, and then you just go do it. That's amazing. Something that probably most of us really aspire to do. Now, you say that you wrote a half a book to talk with your child about that, and then we come to 2024 where you wrote 8 books in 1 year. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, and actually, then I rewrote the first 2, so altogether 10, and then there's 3 compilation volumes of the trilogies along the way too. So nothing like you. I've got
No, we are all writers on a journey. So, tell me more about that year. Was the story in your mind and then it just had to come out, or did the stories and trilogies and how they connected, did that all happen over the course of the year for you?
Yeah, so I finished the first trilogy. Oh, and I should probably just say, get it out of my head. So my mom had passed away that fall right before. And so I don't know what effect that had on me, but I guess it maybe had like an effect of, you're not going to live forever, and stop putting off this trilogy thing. So I finished that. And I'm going to take this opportunity, if you don't mind, just for a 2-minute diversion, because I got to get Tofit in there. Okay, real quick. Does Tofit mean anything to you right now? I mean, as far as a name or anything? Okay. So it
No.
didn't mean anything to me either. So in the first 2 books, I had these land masses. And when I did Forever, which was the 3rd book in the trilogy of the Chronicles of Trinity, I was like, I have one place left on the map. And this is where everything began in the trilogy that I didn't cover yet. And so I have to name it. And it was an island up there. And I was like, okay, I have no idea what to name that, but it's a place in the very beginning, way back in the fantasy of the first book, the prequel, where people were sacrificing their children over a fire to a demon named Moloch. And I was like, okay, so what do I name that? So I said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at all of the land masses I've got on my map from 2005 and 2010, and I'm going to take the first letter of each one of those. And there's one exception, but other than the exception, I didn't think the word would start with O, so I started with the Trinian instead of Omentia. But Trinian, Omentia, Parlantis, Heath, and El Tigra, which I had just added. I just came up with that a lion place on my map in the 3rd book. So I was like, okay, and it was Tophet, Tophet. All right, great. And so I let that sit for a couple days, and then I looked it up on Google. I said, I wonder if that's actually a place. Doesn't sound like a place, but it's got a name, so I'll check it out. And I get the hairs on the back of my neck stand up every time I say this. But I look it up in Google, and I'm paraphrasing, but Google says, this is a ancient land, or a land in ancient Israel, where a sect of Israelites sacrificed their children over a fire to a god or a demon named Moloch. And I was like, okay, so it blew me away, because I'm like, it's impossible, because I didn't even start thinking about the 3rd trilogy until 2024. And in 2005, when I wrote the first book, I had no idea what I was going to have a name like that. In 2010, same thing. And then the order almost that I introduced the different land masses, it's just impossible. The odds of that are just astronomical. And even if I had it in the back of my mind, 15 years and naming a new place, and it's just, so it blows me away. So that was kind of like, that was one of the first little Godwinks that kind of got me going. Getting back to your first question, I had no idea of doing anything more than a trilogy. And then I said, okay, wait, this starts with Abner in the beginning of this Chronicles of Trinian thing. And I was like, there's a whole bunch of stuff I just threw in there as fantasy stones and, medallions and all of these crazy things that I was like, I didn't explain any of that stuff. There's mysteries. So I have to solve all these mysteries, and I have to lead up to Abner in the Chronicles of Trinian. So that became the second one. I was like, okay, so now we've got this land of Trinian, and hey, Trinian is just one of 7 different dimensions and worlds. So these 6 books were just 1/7 of the universe. So it just exploded this into this massive multiverse. Um, and you might think that things get kind of crazy and all, but they stick together really well because the overall themes that are underlying all of this and building it in one land work for all of the lands. They work for the entire universe. And like we talked about before, when we're talking having a Christian series, there's a chessboard and there's a good guy, good king and a bad king, and the good king rules over all this. So I didn't have a problem with going with all the genres in this because everything fits underneath the spiritual genre.
Oh, wow. I love the story of how that all came together for you. I have experienced so many similar things where, writing plunged. I was writing this certain scene and it was just there. It was like, this is the path he has to take. This is where he's going. And it was about 6 months to 8 months later. And I was reading through Elijah's story in the Bible. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is the path he followed, is right here. I never meant that. And it's those moments that mean the most, I think, as a human being and as a writer, when you realize, oh, God is doing something through me. He's working in me to tell the world a story that he wants to tell. I don't think there's anything more meaningful, at least for me. Those are definitely the moments that I appreciate and will hold on to forever. I really, really want our listeners to get inside your head on how you handle having 10 books that cover from the beginning of time to the end of time. Personally, as a writer, I tend to write very short. Like if I actually took the time frames of most of the books that I write, it's like a week in this character's life, a month in this character's life, maybe a year. So I tend to write very, very short. So I am interested to learn from you as well. How do you handle epic time frames? How do you keep the reader engaged and connected with characters throughout that length of time?
Okay, so it's probably a little deceptive, with a 10,000 year thing. In the fourth installment, it does cover some things that happen very early, and then I think we agree that we kind of understand how the end of time is going to come. So it's not actually like, hey, Terry covers every 10 years, over 10,000 years, he covers something. There's a little batch of things in the beginning, and then everything leads up to the end, kind of like the Chronicles of Trinian and the Foundation Chronicles are one part of a pyramid or one edge, and then the Chronicles of the Seven Wheels is another edge, and then this last one, the Chronicles of the Wheelstones, is the third edge, and it builds this big pyramid that leads to the pinnacle and the Cronus Terminus, the end of time. So how do you manage all of that? It was easier because it wasn't, like I said before, it wasn't like I came out and I said, I'm going to do a 10-book series, right? I kind of did a trilogy, and that's manageable, right? A lot of people do that. And so then when the second trilogy packs on, it's kind of like you're building a body. And so the first trilogy was the skeleton, and then you put the meat on it for the second trilogy, and the third one, you wrap it with skin, and then you go, hey, this thing's not breathing yet. And this fourth volume, I think, is the best one, and you're going to put the heart and organs in it so it's breathing and it's alive and it's pumping blood and it's like really fills that body out. So that's how I managed it that way within the trilogies. I thought about that a little bit, and I think what I do is I start from the end. I think of it as a maze. I know where I want to end up. So, you're going to go through the maze and run into all these blocks along the way. Or you're going to, I always cheated when I was young. I'd go back from the end of the maze to the beginning. So I think of it as a maze. I go like that, and I kind of plan out the chapters-ish in that I go, this is where I want to be, and these are the things I've thought of. So I structure those out kind of in an outline with just mainly just chapter names. And then I know I'm not going to get lost in the maze. So I know I can get from the beginning to the end. And I'm free to take whatever deviations I want to take on the road, but I know I won't get lost. And so then I can just enjoy within each chapter and just have fun. And then if it takes me somewhere else, great, I'll change it. But if not, I just plow through. Instead, I want to use to get there, and that kind of determines how many books I'm going to need. Can I do it all in one book, or do I need to do this in partitions, like what ended up happening?
I don't think I have come across another writer who pieces, trilogies together, at least not as many trilogies as you have. When you are developing a book, it sounds like you have taken the best of both worlds. You have taken a light plotting approach and mixed it with a fantastically easygoing pantser approach. So you've given yourself the freedom to do both, which is huge. I love that. It's very much the way that I write. I like to know where I'm going, and speed comes from knowing where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, usually it takes you longer to write the book, and that's okay. You know, all the ways of writing a book are okay. But if you have goals, if you have speed goals and you have to get writing done, then you need to know where you're going. When you're planning, when you're thinking about your next book, what comes first for you? Is it like a theme, a character, a land? What is it that you really lock onto first?
Yeah, I think I lock onto the themes first. So the themes in all of these books, and then overall, is kind of a rejection of modern sci-fi in a way, and fantasy too, because it's so dark and you can't let your kids watch it, and it's just for adults, and it's got a bunch of just yuck in it. So all of these are clean. They don't have any sex. They don't have any bad language. They do have a little, what you would call, not real gross violence kind of thing, but when you have bad guys and you have evil, they're going to do evil things. And if you really sugarcoat that, then I think it loses a lot. So nothing real extreme, but, bad guys are bad guys.
Peril. I like to call that peril. There's peril.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And
You go with theme first.
that's what it was. So instead of having chaos, you have design. And instead of having people being lost, you have purpose. And they're unique and they're important and people are special. And there is help and there is hope and there are answers. So there's answers to the questions out there instead of leaving these big whatever questions, Game of Thrones, and who sits on the throne, or the Wheel of Time. What's with that continuing turning and all. So we've let all this Eastern mysticism and just bad things roll in there, and people being lost. And I wanted to have a series that basically said, God is on the throne, and at Cronus Terminus, he's going to crush that Wheel of Time. So it doesn't just keep going. There is an end. So that's kind of the main thing, the themes, the love, the friendship, all of the good things that we used to really celebrate, and now we've kind of lost our way a little bit.
Appreciate, as a mom, I'm a homeschool mom of two teenagers, and it is so difficult to find books for them to read because almost every single book, even in the Christian market that I pick up, is like, it's got magic, it's got love stories that are, whoa, we're not going there. So I appreciate that. And I think our world definitely needs more writers who are willing to write what's in their heart, to write their passion boldly without letting those cultural norms, if you will, smash their heart. So keep going. Great job. Have you ever gotten feedback from a reader that made you think about your story differently, maybe plan differently, change things? Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, so the major feedbacks, most of it's positive, but every once in a while you get, you let God let your characters out of problems and whatever because they pray or they have faith or all this stuff. And what difference does it make if God's in control and then someone is going to be saved or going to survive? That's just God doing that. And I'm kind of like, well, in every story that is fiction or sci-fi, the authors will let the people out of problems, or they'll solve problems, whatever, for a lot of the wrong reasons, I think. And I think we've let that stuff sneak into our culture, whether it be humanism, hey, we're going to solve all the problems, or science is going to solve the problems for us, which I think is just a deception, from Satan, basically. So I think that's kind of a cop-out. This definitely has Christian influence to it, and I'm not going to shy away from that. I wrote all of these books and spent all this time to glorify God and to say, He is the King of the universe, and now I'm not going to, write the next book and downplay that. And so that's one difference that probably even I say this, I know there's a lot of, like yourself, there's a lot of Christian writers out there now that are really building in the truth into their stories, which is great because we got to fight back. I'm just going to say, well, I'm the author and this is the way it is. And and if anybody can even read the first few pages of my books, I think I consider that a victory. I don't need to sell a bunch of books. I have a witness in the front of my books, and if they don't like that, then okay. But I always say on my website, just one soul is the goal. That is on my blog on chroniclesoftrinian.com. That is my big push. And because what is the value you can put on just one eternity in heaven? So if God uses this for just one person to work faith through them or through it to them, Man, celebrate. Hallelujah. That'd be awesome.
Yes, I agree. It's interesting to look at reader feedback, editor feedback as a writer and not take it personally. I think that's something we all have to grow into. We all start out with a rather thin skin as writers. We put some words on the page, they become our babies, they become so important to us, and a skill that we need to be successful writers and ones who continue doing what we do is that thicker skin, that ability to say, I realize that I cannot please everybody, and I'm okay with that. And so I love to hear you say that just so boldly, is to be like, yes, this is my work, this is what I do. I would love to have you along for the ride, and if it's not for you, then that's okay. I really hope that our listeners take that to heart and are able to go into the feedback, because you're going to get feedback whether you want it or not, and some of it is so valuable. Some of it we need to hear, especially from editors. We need to take what they said into consideration and maybe adapt. But other feedback, we have to be able to just say, I realize that we're coming from two different points of view, and we have to be able to be at peace there. So when you are in the editing process, what does that look like for you? You've written your book, gotten it done. How many edits does it go through?
I never went to school for writing. I never planned on being a writer. I thought, oh, when I'm old, which I guess I'm old now, but when I'm old is when I wrote those first couple books, I was like, oh, this will give me something to do when I can't move anymore. So I live out in Colorado. I'm still hiking the mountains with the big dogs and having all that fun. But I'm getting to that point, and I'm glad I got a good start here. At the academy, you'd be writing a paper and you're typing on the typewriter and you're using the whiteout, and it's just like, oh my goodness. And nobody wanted to be a writer at that point. Some people probably did, but what a pain. Well, now, and here's something that people can use, and maybe maybe this is bad or whatever, but I find all my inspiration amazingly when I'm doing things where I'm not really trying. So I'm not sitting down at the computer looking at the big white page that's blank and getting the writer's block. I have my greatest ideas or my inspirations. It amazes me. I'll go on the walk with the dogs for an hour and a half, and it's like these things come together for me that I wasn't even thinking about. How are these characters going to interact? How did that character jump to that book? What's going? I come back from the walks and I'm absolutely amazed at what happened, and that's why I say I feel like I'm reporting on these stories and not writing them at all. I'm just finding them. I'm discovering them. I see them and then I write it down because somebody's given them to me. So I'm not really being inspired for the actual words or anything, but God's word is in here, so I feel like, okay, maybe he's helping me do that so I can get his word out. Anyway, so it's that. And it's sitting in the hot tub in the morning. I think it's got something to do with the heat and the brain and pumping the blood. I just have the most amazing ideas and thoughts in there. And then the third one is when I'm driving. So I'm out here in the country, so there's not a lot of traffic. But when I'm driving, it takes just enough of my brain away where I'm not, locked up thinking about where do I go now and stuff. I take a pen and I just write dialogue like crazy on a piece of paper. And it just comes to me, and I don't know where it comes from. I'll get back with that writing, that piece of paper, and I'll just sit down with my phone and I'll dictate into my phone, and yeah, the spelling, grammar, everything's all messed up. And then I send it to my computer, and that's where I fix it. One, I'm doing things I enjoy, and things come to me. I'm talking to the phone, no typing involved, and then I get to the computer, and it's easy just to fix the punctuation, whatever. So all of a sudden I've got a chapter, and the goal is 5 to 10 pages a day. Boom, it's there. And then I do that quick edit kind of thing. And when I'm going to do the major edit is after I get the whole thing done and I read through it. And I've done it kind of so fast, it's very enjoyable because it's like, I don't even remember some of the things I wrote. I really enjoy it. So that first edit I'm going through and I'm going, this is great. I'd fix that. And it's not that big a deal. And then you have a program that just reads your words to you. So you get to hear how it sounds to you. Speechify, I think is what it is. And you hear it and you go, oh, wait, that doesn't sound right. And you go in and fix those things. And then, I hate to say it, but I'm kind of in a rush to get this stuff out. I mean, it's kind of like part of the mission. I wanted to get the word out, and the story is really good. One last thing I'll say about that is, compared to a lot of authors that maybe think about a forest, you think of trees in the forest. Each of the books is a tree in the forest. You get them all together, you got a big forest. But an author may really worry about what are the colors of those leaves? What are the shapes of those leaves? How are those leaves moving in the wind? Da, da, da. I don't worry so much about the leaves. I just want the tree to bud at the end, and I want the maple syrup or the sap in the tree. I want that to be sweet, and I want it to really be good. And as long as the tree buds towards the end of the story, then I'm happy. So I don't worry so much, I guess, about a lot of the visuals. And it's kind of like, in the Air Force, we pump out chaff and flares to get rid of the missiles. It's kind of chaff to me. It's important. It's extra, and I try to put it in as much as I can. But I'm really worried about just that architecture of the universe and how everything interrelates and getting the main messages across.
No, you dictate into your phone and it's simple and easy. I have not actually heard that before. I think you were the first writer I've talked to who does it that way. Really fascinating how many different ways we can get a book onto the page. And we have to be willing sometimes to stretch and be uncomfortable and say, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to go out and get these words out there and I can fix them later.
People to do that or to try that because it gets rid of that whole blank page thing. And that's really the writer's main problem, I think, is they get locked up.
When you are starting a story, when you're starting a single book, a trilogy, I think that first book in a trilogy, it has so much work to do. That book has to make readers absolutely fall in love. The typical pattern for a trilogy is book one is your explosive, I fell in love with this character book. Book two is usually a little bit darker. And then book three is you have to have that high point ending in there. Is that how you structure your trilogies? Or when you're working on 3 books at a time, do you see a pattern emerging in how you write them?
Because I didn't go get all those courses in college kind of thing about how you should write or whatever writer's courses. I'm kind of a novice in a lot of ways. I think my books probably are what you kind of described as kind of like the way American movies are, where the 2/3, 3/4 point is where the low point is. That's the darker point. Everybody, the protagonists and the heroes are really in trouble and, they're not going to survive. And then they have the arc back up and everything's great. I think what I probably do is each book in the trilogy probably has that 2/3 dip part and then the upper, the finish that's positive. So each one of the books is kind of a standalone in a way. I mean, you can read it and enjoy it and not have the whole story. Same thing with the trilogy. The trilogies are more that way. And then the whole overall series, of course, is complete. But I don't think I do it in the 2/3, 3/4, a 3-book, the way you described. I think maybe I should, but it seems to work the way I did it. So
right. There is no perfectly right way to write a book. We all have to be willing to learn and grow and yet also just take control of what we do. Something interesting that stands out to me is I've talked with a lot of writers who are like, well, I see this like 3-act structure, if you will. You're supposed to start low, go high, go low, go high. And they're like, I just struggle with what's going to happen in these lower moments that just seems kind of dry. So something that I have done is I try to have that main plot and then 2 subplots in every book. And this is not like a hard and fast rule, but it has really helped me be able to write engaging work. These 2 subplots, I think of it, have you ever done double dutch, like jump rope, or you've seen people doing it where, instead of just one jump rope going around at a certain pace, there's 2. So in my mind, I have 3. And one of them is always up. So even though you're following this general arc of up and down, you have these 2 subplots that are, maybe one of them is just really fun and it's like an Easter egg, readers like, oh, but what about that? And how are they going to do that? And maybe one of them is a little bit more serious, but one of those 3 plots or subplots is always up. And 2 of them are either on their way down or on their way up. And that has helped me as a writer to just make the whole book interesting and not have those dry spots. When you are working on these epic books that cover so much time, they span so many characters, is there a single character that stands out to you out of all your work who is really your heart character, your very favorite? Who is that?
Instantly, I was actually thinking of this before you asked the question, and I was just thinking of M again, her right there. And she just had a big accident. Bad things happen to mom and dad. She's wandering out into the snow. And then she encounters a fantasy character that looks like this guy. And he basically convinces her that she's got a lot of value. And even though things are looking really bad right now, basically says to her, you're going to be important in my story. And she's like, well, look at me. I'm just a little girl. And what value can I offer? And he basically says, well, it's not about the jar of clay. It's what's inside. And she becomes just a giant. She's my favorite because she's, represents my granddaughter. I always say that there's so many characters and there's so many things going on that you're going to find somebody that you can really relate with if you're reading the books. And I think if you follow their their story, you're going to be very satisfied.
Which leads me to my next question. Looking back over your writing journey and the writer that you were when you penned those first
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
and the writer that you are now, what do you think is the biggest craft skill, the biggest writing skill that has grown in you during that time?
Yeah, so dialogue just comes to mind right away. I think the character dialogue is really important, and it really keeps the story moving, and people can relate a lot with it too, because that's what we do. That's what we're doing now. That's what we do every day. We talk to people, and so that's kind of the same solution that I have when I get stuck. The rare times that I do get stuck is I just like start letting the characters talk, and they pretty much decide where the story's going to go. Then they figure out all the problems. They do everything for me. So it's a big, um, I work with them a lot on that. Yeah. So and part of the journey also, I think the books, the trilogies follow. We touched on it a little bit, but they kind of follow my life journey. So the first trilogy was family, and then the expansion to the world with the seven, or not the seven wheels, the Chronicles of Trinian, the Foundation Chronicles. Thank you, my own books. Wow. So yeah, that turned into kind of expanding it to the world, which was kind of like the end of my career and thinking about flying and protecting the United States and allies and all that kind of thing. So my personal growth there, and then retiring, I kind of lost that idea of my mission because I didn't have that mission anymore in the Air Force. So then my mission became probably the most important mission. And through those Godwinks, God's saying, here's your mission. Why don't you talk about me a little bit in your books? And of course it was in there in the earlier ones too, but then I was like, yeah. And then he gave me that expansion and all of that inspiration to really talk the things that are really important and the legacy you really want to leave when you go someday. So for this entire time of writing, even before I was writing the last 9 books or whatever, on Facebook every morning, because I get up really early. I haven't been able to get out of that. I'm always up before 3 o'clock. So I would take a picture of my clock at 3:16, and I'd put John, and I'd post it. And I did that for years. And so when I started getting all these Godwinks of John, or of 3:16s, I was like, so during the second trilogy, I was like, oh, I self-publishing. So you got to pay for your own books. So I was like over the years living out here, I would bury some gold and stuff out in the land. It's kind of a funny thing. But I went and dug up a gold coin. And at that moment, when I called in and said, how much are you going to give me for this? They were like, well, it's changing constantly. Let us check. $2,316. And I was like, okay. And then that book came out. I can't remember, I think it was Stand. It might have been Redeemed. One of the two. And it comes out and the publisher's all done with it, and then you get your copy and it's 316 pages. And I always end my book with 3 crosses, and I'm like, on page 316 there's 3 crosses. How weird is that? And then I get my first review from this lady, and it's her number 316 on Good Books or whatever, and I'm like, okay, that's just kind of crazy. And then I had donated, I said, all the money that I get from the books, we're going to our new church. Whatever I get, it's going to our new church. Our new church opens on March 16th. They have their opening Sunday. No idea that's going to happen, and it was delayed for years during COVID and all this stuff, and I'm like, what is happening? And there's a bunch of 316s like that, so I'll leave you with that, but it more inspiration to, along with the toe fit, I mean, how did that happen? So just another set of God winks there that I had to cover. And I'll say along with that, everybody look around all the time, because God is speaking in ways all the time to you. And he's guiding us and he's showing us stuff, and there's miraculous things that we just blow off as coincidences and things. There are no coincidences. That's all I'll say.
Thank you for sharing your journey with us. Thank you again for your military service. I love how you changed missions. I think there's a lot of listeners who are at a place in their life where they feel the same way. Like, I don't know where I'm going. I need something that I'm living for. For my life, I live for God. But we all do need a drive. We need to be working towards something. That's when we thrive as human beings, is when we're completing things and going hard. So I encourage you today, go out and write your book. Take it on as your mission. Fantastic things can happen. I love the 316. If you don't know what John 3:16 says, I would highly encourage you to open it up and read it. It will change your life. Thank you so much, Terrence, for being here with us today. I appreciate you. If you have an author that you want to see on the Author's Mind, put it in the comments below. If you are an author, you can connect with me at shilohcreed.com. I can't wait to see you again next time to get to chat with more authors and learn more about the authoring world. Have a great day.
Thanks, Shiloh.